Game development explained. No theory, just what works.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Imagine, just for a second, that you are 6 months into a massive project.
Oh yeah, I've been there.
Right. And I mean a real behemoth. You know the exact kind of project I'm talking about. You're leading a team, maybe a heavily specialized team, and everyone is just working incredibly hard.
The energy is high. People are putting in the hours.
Exactly. The Slack channels are firing off at all hours of the day. And if you look at your management software, like if you pull up those executive dashboards, everything is this brilliant, reassuring shade of green.
It looks perfect on paper.
It really does. Your tickets are flowing perfectly from left to right. Your burned down charts look like a textbook example of a healthy sprint.
Right. Your calendar is completely packed back to back with strategic syncs and alignment meetings.
Yeah, on paper, you are running an absolute masterclass in production. But here's the agonizing part. When you look at the actual tangible product.
The thing you're actually trying to build.
Exactly. Let's say it's the playable build of a massive video game, or maybe the core architecture of a new enterprise platform. It has barely changed in months.
It's completely stagnant.
Yeah, the scope just keeps creeping outward in these invisible ways. Decisions that you thought were, definitively put to bed weeks ago are suddenly back on the table.
Being debated by the exact same people.
Yes, and those major foundational milestones, they only seem to exist as brightly colored blocks on your presentation slides. They are completely divorced from the reality of the actual code compiling on the screen.
It is an incredibly common and, frankly, deeply agonizing place to be as a leader.
It really is. It feels like you're going crazy.
Because you are surrounded by all the traditional markers of progress. You're basically choking on the exhaust fumes of hard work, but the vehicle itself is just idling in the driveway.
Idling in the driveway. That's exactly it.
And for you, listening to this right now, the learner who genuinely wants to understand how these complex creative systems actually function and why they break down this specific phenomena is just crucial to dissect.
Because what we're looking at here is a situation where the team is undeniably relentlessly busy, but the system itself has completely stopped steering the project.
Right. The steering mechanism had been entirely severed from the wheels.
And that disconnect is exactly what our mission is for today's deep dive. We are exploring the hidden mechanics of why incredibly smart, highly paid teams get entirely bogged down in this illusion of progress.
Because the truth is, when a project hits this state, you aren't really running a production process anymore.
No, you're not. You're actually playing a very specific kind of game. And to understand why the steering wheel isn't working, we have to look at this fascinating document called the pachinko illusion.
It's a brilliant framing.
It really is. And to grasp it, we actually have to take a mental field trip away from the office. We need to travel to a noisy, chaotic, flashing arcade.
We do. Because there's a central metaphor we're going to use to diagnose this failure state. And once you see it, you will start recognizing it in almost every dysfunctional project you encounter.
Okay, paint the picture for us.
Well, when a project enters this stalled, endlessly busy state, it highly resembles a pachinko machine. Now, in a traditional pachinko parlor, players sit in front of these towering, vertical, mechanical mazes.
The ones with all the little pins, right?
Yeah, exactly. The entire face of the machine is populated with hundreds of little brass pins.
Yeah.
And the objective is to launch small steel balls up into the machine, watch them cascade, and bounce frantically through the chaotic maze, and just hope they land in specific high-value pockets at the bottom.
To trigger a payout.
Right, to win.
It's an intense sensory experience, too. Like, it's incredibly loud, there are flashing lights, bells are ringing, there's a constant physical vibration.
Yes, it's deliberately overwhelming. It is designed to completely overwhelm your senses and make you feel entirely immersed in the action.
To make you feel like you are at the center of everything.
Precisely. But the critical mechanical interaction, the only interface the player actually has is a single knob.
Just one knob.
Just one. This knob controls the strength of the launch. It dictates exactly how hard that steel ball is fired up into the chute before it drops into the maze.
So as a player, you're sitting there, your hand is gripping the knob, you're intensely watching the trajectory of the balls.
Right, you are reacting to bad bounces, and you are constantly making micro adjustments to the strength of your launch.
You feel incredibly engaged. I mean, on a visceral level, you feel like you are actively playing the game, like your skill matters.
But the reality of the math is completely different.
Completely different.
What's fascinating here is the sheer power of the illusion of agency. Because the deeper you look into the mathematics and the physics of pachinko, the more you realize that the player is merely active.
But they are absolutely not in control.
Exactly. They're not in control at all. The actual outcome, the final payout, the win or the loss, is dictated almost entirely by the hidden architecture.
The physical layout of those brass pins.
The pins, the angle of the board, the gravity, and the internal probability models designed by the house. The underlying system is completely in charge.
And the player.
The player is just providing the kinetic energy to keep the system running.
Wow. Okay, wait. I want to map this directly onto my own experience because the feeling of turning that knob is very familiar in an office setting.
Oh, it maps perfectly.
Right. So if my team and I are furiously turning the knob, meaning we're closing dozens of tickets a week, we're running our sprints perfectly, holding daily stand-ups, triaging bugs, how are we not steering the game?
Because from the inside, it feels like intense forward momentum.
Exactly. It feels like we're driving. It sounds to me like we are sitting in a car, gripping the steering wheel, checking our mirrors, aggressively turning the wheel to avoid obstacles.
But the car itself is actually clamped down onto a massive industrial conveyor belt.
Yes. We are putting an immense physical and cognitive effort into the act of driving, but the conveyor belt is fundamentally deciding our actual destination.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. The conveyor belt is the underlying decision architecture of your production system.
Okay, so how does this actually break down in production?
Well, in game development, in enterprise software, really in any complex environment, leaders consistently make a fatal structural error. They mistake knob turning, which is mere process activity, for actual steering.
And steering requires making definitive strategic decisions.
Exactly. You are turning the steering wheel on the conveyor belt. You are optimizing the launch of the steel ball.
Yeah.
But because you aren't altering the underlying structure, you aren't changing the trajectory of the project.
You're just managing the balls.
Right. To actually ship a high-quality product, leadership has to experience a very painful realization. They have to stop obsessing over the exact strength of the launch.
They have to step back.
Step back, open up the glass front of the pachinko machine, and start physically redesigning the board itself. They have to move the pins.
Man. Which is an incredibly daunting task. But it brings up a massive contradiction for me.
What's that?
The teams we are talking about here are not rookies. We are talking about veteran developers, seasoned product managers, fiercely dedicated professionals who have shipped successful things before.
That's very true.
So why do smart, high-performing teams fall for this illusion? Why do they keep turning the knob when the machine is clearly rigged against them? It just seems counterintuitive that brilliant engineers would blindly accept the conveyor belt.
It does seem counterintuitive, right? Until you look at the environment they're operating in. This trap isn't born from incompetence.
Or laziness.
Definitely not laziness. It is actually birthed from a very genuine, very human desire for stability.
Because large-scale creative endeavors are inherently chaotic.
Fundamentally chaotic. You are trying to build something that has never existed before. You are using technology that is constantly shifting beneath your feet.
And coordinating a massive group of highly opinionated people.
Right, people who all have different subjective definitions of what good even looks like. So to survive that daily chaos, to prevent the studio from devolving into pure anarchy, we adopt rituals.
We bring in the complex methodologies.
Exactly. We establish 2-week sprints. We hold retrospective meetings. We create elaborate planning poker sessions. We do this to find a rhythm.
We want a heartbeat. Like, if the project doesn't have a heartbeat, it just feels like a continuous low-grade panic attack. We need to feel like there's an order to the universe we are creating.
We desperately need that heartbeat. But here is where the trap snaps shut. These mechanisms, these daily and weekly rituals, they only provide actual tangible value when they are strictly tethered to real decision-making power.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If you are going through all the motions of the rituals, but the structural forces that actually dictate the project's direction are completely disconnected from those meetings, then your entire process becomes what the document calls a narrative artifact.
A narrative artifact. Wow.
It is an elaborate story you tell yourselves about how organized and professional you are. You are furiously turning the knob, but the machine's payout rules. The actual way that hard decisions are finalized remain completely untouched.
A narrative artifact. I really love that phrase, and I also deeply resent it because it cuts entirely too close to home.
It's uncomfortable, isn't it?
It really is. It's like building a beautifully detailed, hyper-realistic movie set of a functioning office. Everyone is walking around in suits, carrying clipboards, looking very serious, but none of the computers are actually plugged into the wall.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
So let's look at the set dressing. Let's look at the specific tools we use every day that create this pachinko illusion, because the source points out 3 very specific control surfaces that deceive us.
3 things that trick us into thinking we are steering.
Right. Let's start with the first one, which is perhaps the most universally abused tool in the corporate world, the roadmap.
Yeah.
Specifically, how roadmaps function as simulations of certainty. Walk us through this.
So consider the typical project roadmap, especially in the early to mid stages of a complex build. In its purest form, a roadmap is simply supposed to be a declaration of intent.
Like a compass heading.
Exactly. It says, based on what we know today, this is the general direction we want to travel. But in the reality of most studios, it mutates.
The moment it gets put into a slide deck for upper management.
Right. It becomes treated as an ironclad promise. It becomes a simulation of a future that hasn't actually been earned yet.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because I see this constantly. We fill these massive, incredibly dense slide decks with highly precise dates.
And incredibly complex dependency chains.
Yeah, across multiple departments. We say, okay, the animation pipeline will definitely finish on Tuesday the 14th, which means lighting can immediately begin on Wednesday the 15th, and therefore we will confidently hit alpha by the 30th.
And you're doing all of this granular scheduling before the core gameplay loop is even proven to be fun.
Or before the new rendering engine has even been tested. We are essentially drawing a highly detailed street map of a city before we've even discovered the continent it's going to be built on.
That's exactly it. And we have to ask ourselves, why do we invest hundreds of hours into creating these fictional documents?
Because it simulates control.
Yes, a beautifully color-coded Gantt chart is visually and psychologically soothing. It temporarily masks the terrifying underlying instability of the project. It makes the unknown feel known.
So what's the actual result of that behavior?
Teams end up spending massive amounts of their creative energy just rearranging features on a timeline. They sit in meetings for hours, debating whether a feature should be moved from Q2 to Q3.
Just moving little colored blocks around.
Exactly. But they are completely avoiding the actual difficult work, which is resolving the fundamental technical risks that make that timeline utterly irrelevant in the first place.
Right, because if your core networking architecture can't support 30 players in a match, it fundamentally does not matter what month you schedule the final UI polish phase.
The game is broken regardless.
Exactly. Rearranging the polish phase on a slide deck is literally just turning the knob.
Is the illusion of steering.
Okay, let's look at the second control surface that tricks us. And this one is going to ruffle some feathers because it goes after the sacred cows of modern development.
The daily rituals.
Yeah, the stand-ups, the sprints. The idea that we do the process, but we don't actually own it.
Think about the daily stand-up meeting. It is the cornerstone of modern agile development. 15 minutes, everyone stands in a circle. You say what you accomplished yesterday, what you are tackling today, and your blockers.
In theory, it is a brilliant mechanism for rapid alignment. It's a status report and a distress beacon combined.
And the sprint planning meeting is a mechanism for taking a massive mountain of work and breaking it into manageable chunks. But in a pachinko production environment, while everyone is diligently participating in these rituals, the big existential questions remain completely ignored.
Now, wait, I'm going to push back on this a little bit because I want to make sure I really understand the failure point.
Sure.
If I'm looking at my team and we are gathering every single morning, we are incredibly disciplined, we're openly talking about our blockers, engineers are talking to designers, the communication is flowing.
Right, lots of talking.
If we are doing all the agile rituals every day, shouldn't that mean we are actually agile and progressing? How can we be doing the process perfectly by the book and still be totally stationary on the conveyor belt?
Because communication is absolutely not the same thing as resolution. That is the fatal flaw in the assumption.
Oh.
You can communicate articulately and passionately about a critical problem every single morning for 6 consecutive months. But if nobody in that room actually possesses the authority to solve that problem, you're all just gathering around to admire the problem together.
Admiring the problem, that is brutal.
Let's say an engineer says feature X is causing massive memory leaks. The designer says, but feature X is essential for the narrative pacing. You have communicated the blocker.
Then nobody resolves it.
Right. If nobody in that daily stand-up has the sheer authority to look at the board, end the debate, and say, feature X is destabilizing the build, therefore it's being cut today. If that authority doesn't exist, the rituals are just motion without progress.
You are narrating the bouncing of the steel balls.
Exactly. But no one is allowed to reach in and move the pins.
Man, just admiring the problem together. Ah, yes, it seems the steel ball has hit the brass pin of engine failure once again today. Excellent observation, Gary. See y'all tomorrow for the exact same observation.
It is a completely hollow ritual.
Which transitions us perfectly into the third control surface, and this might be the most insidious one, the way we use meetings.
Yes. Not as places to make decisions, but as mechanisms to distribute uncertainty.
Break that down for us.
If we look at the sociology of organizational behavior, we have to examine the true functional purpose of meeting. In a healthy environment, a meeting is a surgical tool.
To compress communication and force closure.
Exactly. You bring people together to look at a singular problem, make a binding choice, and walk out of that room with a new, shared reality.
A new reality. I like that. The world is different after the meeting than it was before.
But in the pachinko production, meetings serve the exact opposite function.
What do they do instead?
They serve to take the massive weight of an uncomfortable uncertainty and distribute it evenly across a larger group of people.
So no single person has to bear the risk of being wrong.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the ultimate, most sophisticated form of knob turning.
I've been in hundreds of these meetings. The discussion is always incredibly reasonable. Everyone makes valid points. And then, right as we approach the moment where a hard call needs to be made.
Somebody notes that we don't quite have enough telemetry data.
Yes. Or we need to check with the marketing team first. So more info is officially requested. And the meeting wraps up with that classic corporate death knell. Let's circle back and sync up on this next week.
And then what happens?
The topic is revisited 3 weeks later, usually with a slightly different configuration of people. The context has to be re-explained, and the exact same cycle happens all over again.
The discussion was held, the calendar block was filled, the knob was turned. But the actual layout of the pins on the board never moved a millimeter.
You just took the anxiety of the unknown and smeared it across a wider array of Outlook calendars.
Perfectly said.
Okay, so if these tools, the roadmaps, the daily rituals, the endless meetings, if they are basically institutional quicksand, why are we so deeply addicted to them?
We truly are addicted.
We cling to them like a life raft. To understand this, we have to look away from the software and look at the psychology of the people running the process.
We do, because you cannot dismantle the machine until you understand the psychological drivers that keep us feeding quarters into it every morning.
It's a deeply seductive trap because it's a natural human response to the crushing complexity of making games or software or anything huge.
There are 3 psychological pillars that hold this illusion up.
Let's look at the first one. Anxiety reduction.
If you are managing a project of this scale, the sheer volume of unknown variables is staggering. It is a constantly anxiety-inducing state of existence.
You're perpetually aware that the entire architecture could collapse.
Right. It's terrifying. So a calendar completely full of meetings, a meticulously structured Jira board with beautifully written user stories, these act as psychological safety blankets.
When you look at a neat board, your brain says, look at all this structure. This chaotic situation is actually manageable.
It provides immediate, tangible relief from the ambient anxiety, effectively hiding the terrifying reality that the actual playable game build crashes every 15 minutes.
It's the illusion of order. Like, if my physical desk is perfectly clean, my life must be in order, right? Even if I haven't paid my taxes in 3 years.
Exactly. The visual order soothes the internal panic.
Okay, the second psychological pillar is responsibility distribution. And this one is uncomfortable to talk about because it touches on sheer professional fear.
It does. These fields involve tens of millions of dollars, years of people's lives, and huge expectations. The stakes are incredibly high.
So what does this actually mean for the individual lead sitting in that room? It means making a hard call is terrifying. If I say we are cutting the multiplayer mode because the netcode is garbage and then the game flops, that is my head on the chopping block. So what does this all mean? We're basically hiding behind the process.
Exactly. When a system is highly complex, it is psychologically far easier to let the process make the dangerous decisions.
Because it feels safer for your career.
Yes. If you throw a controversial problem to a committee, or demand endless A/B testing data, you are diffusing the responsibility. If the project fails, you have an alibi.
I didn't make a bad call. We consulted all the stakeholders.
Right. You survive, even if the project dies. You are actively avoiding the acute risk of taking a hard stance by simply refusing to take a definitive stance at all.
That is a brutal assessment, but it rings incredibly true, which flows right into the third psychological pillar, the seduction of discussion.
We work in creative industries. We love to talk about design.
We really do. Discussion inherently feels highly productive because it generates a constant stream of new insights. It genuinely feels like you are doing the hard work.
It feels like work because your brain is fully engaged. You are debating the deep nuances of user psychology or narrative arcs. It's intellectually stimulating.
But there is a warning here.
There is a crucial maxim from the text, and honestly, it should be printed in bold letters and hung in every conference room. Insight without a decision is just noise in a production environment.
Say that again. Insight without a decision is just noise.
Yes. You can gather the smartest people. You can have the most profound realization about why a mechanic is failing. But if that meeting doesn't end with someone saying, therefore, we are changing variable X to variable Y tonight,
then it was just intellectual entertainment.
it was just noise. It did not change the physical trajectory of the product. The steel ball is still falling down the exact same path.
Okay, we have diagnosed the illness. We've looked at the symptoms and the psychology. Now let's look at a concrete medical record.
A real-world example.
Yeah, a team that was hopelessly trapped inside this machine and exactly how they broke out. Let's look at the case study of the infinite vertical slice.
This is a highly specific scenario, but the dynamics will be universally recognizable. It details the transition from pre-production to a vertical slice.
And a vertical slice is supposed to be a fully playable, polished cross-section of the game, right? Proving all the core systems work together.
Exactly. It's the ultimate proof of concept.
So let's set the stage for the listener. We are looking at a team of about 60 developers making a third-person action title. And on paper, they are the model of modern production.
They're doing everything right. 2-week sprints, an approved roadmap, professional burn-down charts.
They are turning the knob with incredible precision. But there is a massive problem. For 4 agonizing months, the crucial combat feel milestone has remained completely stuck in progress.
And in an action game, the combat feel is the foundation. If it doesn't feel visceral and satisfying, literally nothing else matters.
So let's look in the symptom versus the dynamic. The symptom is what you see on the surface. Every 2 weeks, the combat designer presents an iteration.
And everyone sits around and observes it.
Right. The leads offer their feedback. It needs more weight. The anticipation frames are too long. The combat designer takes notes, writes up JIRA tickets, and they go back to the drawing board.
That is the symptom.
Well.
Endless, polite loops of feedback. But the pachinko dynamic is what is actually happening structurally.
The team is furiously turning the knob, tweaking numbers, updating tickets, but the structure is broken.
Because the process is entirely democratic, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone gets a say, which paralyzes the outcome.
Yes. In a high-stakes production environment, a pure democracy means the decision never actually closes, because there is no single owner who possesses the authority to define what done actually looks like.
So the steel ball just bounces endlessly between everyone's subjective opinions. Needs more weight. Now it's floaty. It's an infinite loop.
So how do they finally fix it? They didn't add more meetings, and they didn't just turn the knob harder. Leadership redesigned the board itself.
They made 3 structural interventions. Let's go through them. Number 1, establishing radical decision ownership.
They looked at this endless democracy and dismantled it. They designated a single combat strike team lead and gave them the final, unreviewable say.
Unreviewable, that sounds harsh, like appointing a dictator.
It sounds harsh, but it shifted the meetings immediately from loops of feedback to inputs for a resolution. The team was still collaborating, but they were giving data to one person whose explicit job was to make the binding call.
The pins were rearranged so the ball had a pocket to fall into. Okay, intervention 2, milestones as evidence.
They stopped treating the vertical slice as a calendar date.
Because a date is just a wish.
Right. It became a technical validation point. The new definition was, the combat system must support 10 enemies at 60 frames per second with 0 dropped animation frames.
That is entirely binary. It either does that or it crashes. It completely removes the subjective debate. It's a physics equation.
It forces actual steering. You can't fake 60 frames per second with a colorful slide deck.
And the third intervention, which is where leadership really had to make everyone deeply uncomfortable, prioritization gravity.
They halted all work on environmental storytelling and secondary UI. They told those teams to put their pens down.
Wow.
They created directional gravity. By intentionally stopping that work, leadership forced all of the steel balls, the time, the focus, to land in the only pockets that mattered.
Proving the combat system, which causes friction, telling an artist to stop making things look beautiful. But the result was staggering. According to the document, within 6 weeks of making these changes, combat was definitively locked.
4 months of paralysis, solved in 6 weeks.
Endless feedback loops were replaced with ownership and evidence. They broke the machine. So this case study is the perfect blueprint. We can extract 3 universal rules from this success story to apply to the listener's own work.
And the connective tissue binding these pillars is a shift in perspective. To escape the machine, you must stop looking at your scheduling tools and start looking at your decision architecture.
Okay, pillar 1, radical decision ownership.
Every meaningful decision must have a specific named owner.
This doesn't mean killing collaboration, right?
Not at all. Collaboration is vital. You want the smartest minds vigorously debating. But once that phase reaches its endpoint, someone must close the disagreement. If you cannot name the specific owner of a decision, the decision fundamentally does not exist.
That is a brutal litmus test. Pillar 2, stable priorities or directional gravity.
A project cannot chase every cool idea from a sprint. Stable priorities create a gravitational pull, so developers can make small, local decisions pointing in the same direction.
Because if priorities change every week, it's like someone is violently tilting the pachinko machine. The balls bounce unpredictably, and you never gain any forward momentum. Stability means changes are deliberate and rare.
Exactly. And pillar 3, milestones as evidence points. Stop celebrating when a calendar date passes.
Right, because that just proves the Earth rotated.
This raises an important question. Are you measuring time spent or progress made? Start celebrating only when a risk is retired. Prove the pipeline makes 10 assets a week. Prove the networking code supports 32 players. Use evidence, not dates.
We have the theory and the pillars. Let's do a live diagnostic to see if you, the listener, are currently a leader or just a knob turner. We have 4 very pointed diagnostic questions.
Question 1. Do the exact same strategic discussions reappear in your meetings month after month?
Question 2. Does your roadmap change more frequently than the playable build actually evolves?
That's question 3. Do your meetings frequently end with, let's revisit this later, without assigning a decision owner?
And question 4. Are you measuring activity, like closed tickets, or outcomes, like retired risks? The reality check here is brutal.
If the answer to the first 3 is yes, you are generating motion without steering. You are launching balls, but the pins aren't moving.
Which means we need to redefine production leadership. It's often misinterpreted as pure coordination, cleaning up Jira, syncing calendars.
Those are secondary. The actual essence of leadership is maintaining control over the project's trajectory by forcing decisions into existence. Which features stay? What technical risk do we tackle this morning?
Forcing decisions into existence. Because if you don't reliably convert talk into decisions, the project just drifts toward its default outcome.
Which brings us to the ultimate law of the pachinko parlor. If you let the machine determine the results, the house always wins.
Recognizing that you are just turning a knob is the painful first step. The triumphant second step is reaching your hands into the machine and moving the pins. So look at the project sitting on your desk right now. Are you managing the flow of the balls or redesigning the board?
And there is a final, unmentioned implication to mull over. If the pachinko illusion thrives because of our human desire for psychological safety and democratic discussion, does true, breakthrough innovation actually require us to be intensely uncomfortable and deliberately undemocratic at key moments?
That is a heavy thing to chew on. Sometimes you have to break the illusion of harmony to actually steer the ship. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take back control of your own game board, and we'll catch you next time.
If this is useful, subscribe.
New breakdowns every week.